Welcome back to another deep dive.
Yep.
Today we have a really kind of poignant story, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Excerpts from a PDF called Eshelman.pds.
Okay.
And it's a story of a teacher who leaves his rural mountain school to go seek greener pastures in the big city.
Yeah.
And, well, his journey doesn't go exactly as planned.
Right.
So we got to take a look at this journey. His motivations for leaving, the reality he encounters when he gets to the big city, and ultimately what his final decision to go back to the mountains really says about ambition and finding that sense of belonging.
Absolutely. And I think, this isn't just a surface level story. This is a story that allows us to see into the complexities of choice. The allure of opportunity versus sometimes that feeling that we get, that pull back to where we came from.
Right.
And that need to belong to something.
Yeah.
A community.
Yeah. So our mission today is to kind of go past just the surface and really understand what was going on with this teacher's journey. What are the challenges he faced? And ultimately, what's the significance of him going back to the mountain?
Exactly.
Okay, so the story begins with our teacher, Han Guang, seeking a meeting with the headmaster of the mountain school where he teaches to hand in his resignation.
Right.
And it sounds like the headmaster wasn't completely blindsided by this.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting right from the beginning is how the headmaster kind of knew this was coming.
Yeah.
The headmaster acknowledges that it's hard life, low pay, the school itself is falling apart, and there aren't that many students left at the school.
Yeah.
So it really kind of paints this picture of, the challenges of trying to teach in this environment. What do you think when you read that about the school itself? What does that say to you about the kind of resources that are available there in this community?
Yeah, it's really setting the stage. I mean, I think we can already kind of tell that this isn't a community that's thriving.
Right.
And makes you think about, for the teachers that do stay, what are the challenges they must be facing?
Yeah.
But Han Guang is pretty straightforward. He explains that he needs to leave because he can't support his family.
Yeah.
On what he's making. He's got debts to pay. So it's like a very practical, relatable thing he needs to provide.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that's so interesting about this story is it really highlights that tension that people face when you want to do something for your community like teaching, but at the same time you have this fundamental need to be able to take care of yourself and your family.
Right.
To have financial security. But, what really struck me was the headmaster's reaction. It's almost like he understands. He doesn't fight it at all.
Well,
he even says at one point that one less teacher isn't really going to change anything. So what do you think that says? Is that just him giving up? Is it a realistic assessment of the school? Or is it just kind of like this, quiet understanding that this is what Han Guang needs to do?
Yeah, it's really hard to say what's going through the headmaster's mind.
Yeah.
I think it's probably all those things to some degree.
Right.
And it must be really tough to watch teachers leave, to see your school sort of fall apart.
Yeah.
But he does accept the resignation pretty quickly.
Right.
And Han Guang leaves.
Yep.
And so he travels by tricycle first and then train heading south towards the city.
Okay.
And I think it's safe to say that he's got to be carrying some amount of hope with him.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? That he's going to have a brighter future
Yeah.
when he gets there.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that classic tale of going to the big city to try to make it.
Right.
And the story immediately contrasts the rural mountain setting with this bustling city. Like you get these images of crowded streets, tall buildings, all the cars.
Yeah.
And that must have been such a sensory overload.
Yeah.
For him to go from the quiet of the mountains to that.
Yeah.
So what happens when he gets there?
Well, reality sets in.
Okay.
Right. He's got to find a job.
Right.
And the story throws us right into this series of rejections.
Okay.
Right. So we're hearing all these questions about his skills.
Right.
Right. Like, do you know web design?
Okay.
Do you have any unique design skills? What about marketing?
Okay.
Can you speak English enough to deal with foreign businesses?
Right.
So they're basically telling him he doesn't have the skills that they need.
Yeah. And I think what's striking here is that the skills they're looking for in the city, like web design or marketing, it's so different from anything that would have been useful in the rural community he came from.
Right.
It just shows that disconnect that sometimes happens
Right.
between what's valued in different environments, like different economies.
Right.
And I think that's something that we see a lot in the real world, too.
Yeah.
Think about your own experience or people How often do you see people who have skills that just don't match up
Yeah,
with the jobs that are out there?
it's tough. And it's got to be tough for somebody like him
Yeah.
who goes there with all these expectations
Right.
and it doesn't pan out.
And you can see in the story he becomes disillusioned.
Yeah.
Each rejection just kind of chips away
Yeah.
at that hope that he brought with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so feeling dejected after all those closed doors, what happens?
Well, he ends up drinking pretty heavily,
Okay.
and he stumbles into this brightly lit, glass-walled establishment.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting, this description, this bright light,
Yeah.
all the glass. It's like a totally different world from what he's been dealing with.
It's almost like stepping into a different reality.
Right.
Yeah.
And inside, he's greeted by the owner.
Okay.
It's a woman, and she's very kind to him,
Right.
even though he's obviously intoxicated.
Yeah.
And she offers to help him sober up. And she calls for somebody named Ashang.
Okay. Interesting. So we have this random act of kindness
Yeah.
from a complete stranger.
Right.
And so what does Ajing Eng do?
Well, Ashang takes him to a small room.
Okay.
It's got a bed in it.
Mm-hmm.
Offers him tea.
Yeah.
But he's clearly exhausted. He's probably depressed. And all he wants to do is sleep.
Right.
And during this very brief interaction, Ashang asks him a couple of questions.
Okay.
Like, where are you from?
Yeah.
What are you doing here in the city?
Mm-hmm.
So he tells her he's from the mountains,
Okay.
looking for work.
Mm-hmm.
And then he very practically asks, how much is this going to cost?
Right. Because, of course, that's his main concern, right?
All right.
Yeah.
And then Ashing does something unexpected.
Okay. What is that?
She mentions she's not feeling well
Mm-hmm.
and offers to give him a massage,
Wow.
which is really kind of a vulnerable, generous thing to do.
It really is, especially to a complete stranger in that situation.
Right.
So what do you think?
Yeah.
Why is she being so nice?
Yeah, it's a question that you kind of keep in the back of your mind as you read
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So he falls asleep,
Okay.
overwhelmed, exhausted. And when he wakes up, he's immediately concerned about the cost.
Okay.
So he asks her how much he owes her.
Right.
And she says 100 yuan,
Mm-hmm.
payable to the owner.
Okay.
And she sees him out.
Mm-hmm.
And he steps out into the city night. And it mentions that the lights are colorful and bright.
Yeah.
And it's at that point that he realizes that 100 yuan was his last money.
Wow.
Right? He came to the city to improve his situation. Now he's penniless and alone.
That's a tough situation.
Yeah. So as he's walking aimlessly, he reaches for a cigarette and finds this little package on him.
Okay.
And under the glow of a streetlight, he opens it up and finds 600 yuan,
Wow.
which is a lot of money.
It is.
But even more surprising is he finds a note.
Okay.
And this is where I think the story really takes a huge turn.
Yeah. What does the note say?
Well, it starts with these really moving questions. It says,
Mm-hmm.
Sir, how did you end up here?
Mm.
Sir, how did you become like this?
Mm-hmm.
And then the writer reveals that she is a Shang,
Wow.
his former student from the mountain.
That is a crazy twist.
It is.
Yeah.
And so this person who showed him such kindness
Yeah.
turns out to be someone from his past,
Right.
someone whose life has clearly taken a very different turn since leaving the mountains.
And it makes you wonder, what happened to her
Right.
in those intervening years?
Yeah. And the note goes on. She mentions that she left the mountains years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and she says she's become like this now,
Right.
which suggests that maybe she's not living the best life.
Yeah. There's a real sense of, maybe she's had to make some difficult choices
Yeah.
to survive.
Yeah. And then the note takes an even more interesting turn
Okay.
because she reminds him about his students
Okay.
who are waiting back in the mountains. And she encourages him to return to teaching, to his old profession.
Okay.
And then she acknowledges that the money she's giving him might not be clean,
Right.
but she hopes it can help him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this incredibly poignant plea for him to go back home.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
It is.
And I think it really makes you think about the impact that teachers have,
Hmm.
Even years later.
Right.
Their students might be out there in the world and they remember them.
Yeah.
And that connection can really come back in surprising ways.
Yeah. And it challenges our assumptions about who can offer help.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm.
Like, here's this former student who's maybe in a vulnerable position herself.
Yeah.
But she's the one helping him.
Right.
And it really emphasizes that idea of human connection.
Absolutely.
So the story tells us that he was incredibly moved by this note,
Mm-hmm.
tears streaming down his face. and he starts calling out her name.
Yeah.
Ashang. Ashang. Lu Ashang.
Wow.
And he searches the city for her, frantically trying to find her.
Yeah.
And he encounters other women named Ashang, but none of them are her.
Right.
So eventually, exhausted, heartbroken, he gives up and returns to the mountains to the school late at night.
Okay.
And there, holding a lamp, waiting for him,
Yeah.
is the headmaster.
Wow.
And it's almost like a symbolic image, isn't it? Like a beacon in the darkness.
Yeah, it really is. Like he was expecting him.
Yeah.
Knew that he'd come back.
Right. And the headmaster's reaction is so understated.
Yeah.
You know, he just says, I knew you'd be back. It was only a matter of time.
Mm.
Come on in. Let's have a drink.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a quiet gesture of understanding and acceptance.
It really is. And he sees how the city has changed him.
Mm.
You know, the story talks about his sunken eyes, his hair's gone gray.
Right.
He's aged.
Right. It's this really subtle way of showing how much he's suffered.
Yeah, it really packs an emotional punch without being over the top.
Yes.
And then what happens?
He tries to bring up his resignation letter, and the headmaster just dismisses it.
How does he do that?
Oh, he says, I used it to wipe the table.
Wow.
So it's like this very funny, nonchalant way of saying that was never really an issue.
Yeah, he never took it seriously.
Right.
And I think what's interesting here is that the headmaster's been quietly supporting him all along.
Yeah.
He says he told the other teachers and the students that Han Guang was just away on business.
Mhm.
So he kept his job open
Right.
for him.
Yeah.
And I think that shows a deep understanding of Han Guang and what he truly values.
Yeah.
And then he gives him this incredible reassurance.
Right.
He says other professions just aren't for you.
Yeah.
Your true calling is teaching.
Yeah.
Go back to the students.
Mm-hmm.
They're waiting for you.
Yeah. It's just so powerful. It's like this affirmation of who he is
Yeah,
and what he's meant to do.
right.
And so as Han Guang leaves the headmaster's home, dawn is breaking.
Okay.
There's kind of a classic symbol.
Yeah, of a new beginning.
Yeah.
Fresh
It's
start.
a new day.
Yeah.
And he feels this like pang of emotion.
Okay.
And then from the mountainside, he hears the sound of children singing.
Oh, wow.
It's a very clear, bright children's song.
Okay.
And this is how the story ends.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It is. It's so poignant.
What are they singing about?
So the song is about a child going to school,
Okay.
facing the elements, but mostly worried about disappointing the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And it just brings everything full circle.
Yeah, it really does.
It reminds us of how important the teacher is
Mm-hmm.
in these children's lives
Right.
and in the community as a whole.
Exactly. And it shows that Han Guang is right where he belongs.
Yeah.
Back in the mountains.
Yeah. What do you think, like, what does that final image
Yeah.
and that song evoke for you?
Well, for me, it's really all about that feeling of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think Han Guang went to the city looking for something more,
Yeah.
but what he really needed was already there
Right.
in the mountains. Yeah.
Teaching those kids.
Yeah.
And it shows that sometimes our true calling isn't about money or status.
Right.
It's about making a difference
Yeah.
in the lives of others.
Yeah. So if we're going to sort of wrap up Han Guang's journey and bring it back to our listeners,
Yeah.
I think this really shows just how tough things can be
Yeah.
when you try to seek opportunity outside your familiar environment.
Mm-hmm.
And it reveals that sometimes that search for a quote unquote better life doesn't always go as planned.
Absolutely. And you can end up facing challenges that you never expected
Right.
and become disillusioned
Right.
with the whole thing.
Yeah. And I think what this story also underscores is just how powerful human connections can be.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, Ojang's act of kindness
Right.
completely changed the course of Han Guang's life.
Right.
It reminded him of who he was,
Yeah.
where he belonged,
Mm-hmm.
and that even though we might not always see it, those connections that we make throughout our lives,
Yeah.
they can have a lasting impact.
Right. And come back when we need them most.
Yeah,
It's really quite beautiful.
it is.
Yeah.
And you've seen how ambition can lead to disappointment,
Right.
but that sometimes the things that matter most are that feeling of community,
Yeah.
a sense of belonging.
Exactly. And Han Guang's story really suggests that maybe true fulfillment isn't always about chasing after something better somewhere else, but it's about recognizing and valuing what we already have
Yeah.
and the contributions that we can make to our communities.
Yeah, so this kind of leads us to a question for you, our listeners,
Right.
to think about.
Right.
You know, in a world where we're constantly told to climb the ladder, to be more successful, what does it actually mean to live a fulfilling life,
Yeah. What is success?
right? Is it money?
Yeah.
Is it status?
Or is it something else?
Or is it like Han Guan's story suggests, finding that place where you belong?
Yeah, and I think that's the question that we all need to grapple with.
Yeah.
You know what is more important, financial gain or that sense of purpose that comes from giving back to your community.
Yeah.
And how do we find that balance between our own personal ambitions and the value of staying connected
Right.
to the places and the people that have shaped us?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It is.
So we hope that you'll kind of carry that question with you long after this deep dive is over.
Yeah, definitely. Think about it.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us.